Wander Wealthy Podcast, episode 85 with Desirae Odjick. All right, my friends, welcome back to the Wander Wealthy Podcast. If you're new, my name is Tess Wicks. I am the host of this lovely show. And today we have a guest. Her name is Desirae Odjick, and I have been quietly Twitter and Instagram stalking her for quite some time. She is also a personal finance blogger, and her blog is named Half Banked, which for me, it's like a funny play on words. But Desirae really approaches writing about personal finances in such a easy to understand, and like seriously, you're just sitting down with a friend and getting some information like, oh my gosh, you do that? I should do that. You do that? Okay, I'm going to do that. I guess that's how I would explain it. But her blog is a personal finance blog for millennials. And she says she wants to help them manage their money and still have a life. And I think that is so nice. It's like have your latte and your avocado toast, which is something she likes to point out a lot in her blog. And I reached out to her in particular because I wanted to talk about a topic that she had recently blogged about, or not recently, but she had blogged about, and one of the tweets had kind of resurfaced itself in my feed, and it's about the topic of homeownership. Now, it's kind of funny because we're going to have this conversation, and both Desirae and I are homeowners. However, we both have very particular views on whether someone needs to buy a home or not. And for the most part, the answer is you don't need to buy a home. So we talk all about that in this week's episode, and we're really going to get into it because it's so important for people to recognize, especially because buying a home is such a huge investment of your money. Like, it is an enormous amount. And she makes a comparison to Coachella, which I think is like totally on point and on brand. So it's just a really great conversation. You're also going to hear Desirae share her love for her full-time job and how Half Banked is really just a side hustle, but it's an income stream that helped her get to the goals that she wanted to achieve in life, which were right now being able to put a down payment on a home and have it be sufficient and do it in a small chunk of time. And then moving on to saving for a wedding within 12 months and not having to use any source of debt or anything. They used all cash to pay for their wedding and so much more. She also explains how her and her spouse have approached managing their finances. And I think it's a unique way that I have not personally heard, but it makes a lot of sense. And if it works for them, it can definitely work for one of you or all of you. So if that's something that you're looking for, then that's going to be in the show as well. So this show is packed full of really good stuff. I had such a fun time officially connecting and becoming, I guess, phone call friends, from online friends to on the phone friends. Someday we'll become real life friends. It was so much fun to meet her and to hear her great words. So without further ado, let's get into this episode with Desirae Odjick. And apologies in advance for all of my oversharing that I do in this episode. Desirae, welcome to the Wander Wealthy Podcast. I'm so excited that we finally get to connect after being quietly following each other for some time. Tell us how you're doing today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I'm also glad that we finally get to make our like quiet internet friendship real. I'm good. I'm good. How are things with you?
Not too bad. I have gone ahead and done your kind of professional bio, but I would love for you to introduce yourself more on a like girlfriend to girlfriend style. How would you, if we were just getting drinks at a bar, tell me who you are, how you got into the work that you do, and what is it that you do today?
I love that. Okay, so we're getting drinks at a bar. I'm 29. I live in boring suburbs of Ottawa, Ontario, and I love it. I am just like a total homebody at heart, and I love living in the suburbs. It really suits me, which is a very lame thing to say. But on the other hand, for fun, 3 years ago, I started a personal finance website. So, no one's really shocked here. And so I started my site because I really was starting to get into looking at my finances more, looking at blogs that would help me with my finances, help me save more money, help me do things like, maybe buy a house someday, which I ended up doing. And a lot of the stuff I found was really aggressive. I want to say, like, I think a lot of people do start their journey in and around a certain financial site that shall not be named that really judges people for spending money. And it was helpful in a way because it really was like this shock of like, oh my gosh, everything I'm doing is wrong. And so that's kind of where I started my journey. And then after writing about money on my own website, I was like, oh, wait, I don't want to tell people that they're wrong for spending money. So that's really how the blog started. It's really evolved over the years, and I've just been writing about my own financial goals, the things that I'm learning, and trying to do it in a way that doesn't make people feel bad when they read it.
I like that. I think that can be hard to do, though, because sometimes I feel the pressure as a financial content creator myself of like providing people with the right answer. And you want to be like, it's okay to do whatever, but it's also like you want to be clear. How do you draw that line?
That is a really good question. It's one that I finally this year figured out a rough way to look at it. And this was around when all of the tweets were blowing up about by 30, you should have 1 times your annual income saved. And that is an objectively solid guideline. Like it's rough and it's hard to do and it doesn't suit everyone. But thinking about that and watching the backlash to it going viral again, because I feel like it goes viral every 6 months, was that really with those kind of rules, I think of them as the pirate's code of money. They're not so much rules, they're guidelines. And so if you can't get to like that level, it's a good guideline because if you can get closer rather than further away from that guideline, you're going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think like if we could just simplify our job, it would just be like, just save more. Like just head upwards, like aim your sights high.
Totally. That really is what it boils down to. Just, save as much as you can. And that might be different for everyone. Let's just close our blogs now. Just save as much as you can and we'll just go home.
Right. Oh, if only were that simple. So you said that you work from home. Do you work entirely on your blog and working with other kind of financial media sites, or what is it that you do for money?
Yeah. So for money, I actually do have a full-time job that I work remotely. So I am in content marketing for a company called Shopify. And then on the side of that, I run my blog and I do work with financial technology companies to either work with them on promotions on my site, or recently I actually just wrapped a really cool project writing a course for a financial company that wanted to help kind of educate their users on what it is they do, how to get better at money, all that good stuff. So I do a bunch of freelance projects through the blog, but my full-time gig is with Shopify.
Very cool. Now that we know about what you do, what your blog is, I'd love to dive into a little bit more of your personal story. And I think it's always helpful for people to hear from others' experiences, especially how like they grew up around money and how that has either impacted them it has impacted them, but whether it's, impacted them in a positive way, or if it's helped them, change their behaviors because it was maybe a negative experience or something. So how did you grow up around money, and what kind of relationship do you now have with money today as a result of maybe that?
That is an awesome question. So my childhood, I grew up basically in the Gilmore Girls is how I always put it for people. So
this is why you love the suburbs, isn't it?
It is a little bit. So it was always just my mom and I. We're really, really close. And she is a money superstar. So she raised me as a single parent. She built her own business while she was doing it so that she could have the flexibility to be home with me and be home when I needed her, but still earn enough income to support our whole family because it was just her and I. And so she was amazing. And she always taught me that it was important to talk about money, and it was important to understand how money worked. So I remember, this is such a good anecdote, and it makes sense why I turned into a personal finance blogger. She paid me to read The Wealthy Barber in high school. So it was only $20, but it was $20 like, what was that? Like 10 years ago now. So, inflation, that's maybe like $25 today.
Sure.
And so she always just thought it was really important. There's a Canadian money magazine called Money Sense, and they used to do print, magazines, and they're just online now, but she'd always have that around the house, just lying around. So I always knew the theory of money, and I always had a really good baseline of, this is what you're supposed to do. I found that in practice, once I graduated from school and tried to implement those things, it was a little bit harder when, the rubber met the road and I had to do the things like investing. So that's really where I focus a lot of the blog on, is just the how do I do it? Because what to do is important. It's important that you invest, and it's important that you understand those concepts, and it's important that you save money. But when you're finally getting into it and you're like, how do I buy insurance? That's such a good question if you've never done it. Like, how do you do that? And that is really what informs a lot of my content from my upbringing, because you can know what to do, but even with all of the advantages I had of my mom paying me to read financial books and leaving money magazines around the house, I still stumbled when it came to investing and getting insurance and implementing all of those things when I was a real grown-up.
And that's really interesting, because the how is the thing. People can sit and look at a computer screen and have their, let's say, brokerage account open, but actually, how do you, go and find an ETF or an individual stock and click the buttons and do the purchases, even so unintuitive. And thankfully, technology is helping it. But there's a lot of old school things that are still out there, especially when it comes to money and taxes and things that, maybe technology hasn't caught quite up with. It's the how that can hold you back from actually going and doing it.
Totally. I remember, so the investing specifically, and I feel like I've told this story a zillion times, but it is one of my most cherished grudges. I went into the bank and I sat down and I made an appointment. I was like, I would like to invest my money, because I thought the bank was how you did that. And they looked at me, and I had like maybe $5,000 when I was ready to go and start investing. And they just were like, you don't have enough money. And I was like, cool. And then I did nothing for 3 years because, the bank said so. And that was how I thought you did it. So I couldn't invest yet. I deeply regret that, but it really gave me a lot of empathy for how hard it can be if you think this is the way to do it, how confusing it can be to think about other methods, and why I think it's so important to write about all of the other options that are available now, because you're right, technology has made so many things so much easier.
Yeah, but if you don't know, then where do you even start? Cool. You had touched on something earlier where we were talking about guidelines and kind of drawing a line and being a little more clear, but being it the pirate's code of money. Speaking of guidelines, there's also the the pressure to also be a homeowner and have 7 kids and 2 dogs and have your life together by your 30. And that's something that we're going to be talking about today, specifically the homeownership one. Do what you want with your baby making and dog buying. I don't know how dogs get acquired, but I'm guessing philosophies. So before we get into that, I want to talk about your current financial situation, because we're getting real intimate here. What big financial goals or decisions have you made recently? And what does your financial picture look like now? Like, you're sitting in the suburbs. Where do you spend your money, and where have you spent your money to, get to where you are?
That is an awesome question and covers a lot. So I'm going to try to make sure that I hit all of the
paint the whole picture.
So I started my blog. Honestly, it came about because I was looking at a spreadsheet and I was like, okay, if I want to buy a house in 2 years and I want to do it with my partner, so I have to cover about half, and this is what houses go for in our area. I literally had this oh shit moment where I was like, I have to save half my income to make that reasonable on my timeline. And I was like, okay, I might as well blog about that on the internet. But honestly, it was really hard. And I feel like for those 2 years, I was so laser focused on saving as much as I could through any means possible. It was not balanced. It was just like a crazy sprint towards this big goal of buying a home. And that makes it sound like I think everyone should buy a home, but we will get to that later. I do not think everyone should or needs to buy a home. But it was a big lifestyle thing that I wanted, purely from it fits for the life that I like and wanted for myself. So that was the big goal. That happened about a year and a half ago. Finally bought the house, closed, everything's awesome. And I, in retrospect, do think all the saving was worth it. And then this past August, so a couple months ago, I got married. So that was all very exciting. We got the keys to the house. He proposed when we walked into the empty house. It was very sweet.
Gosh.
Yeah. But it really did flip from, okay, we just saved for the house. We just saved for closing costs. Okay, now we've got 12 months. We have to save for a wedding. So it really does feel like the last 3 years we're very focused on time specific goals that needed us to save a certain amount of money. So right now we're in this weird 6-month period that we've given ourselves where we're still saving, but not aggressively and not for anything specific. We're just kind of taking a breather, making it through the holidays, and then we're going to sit down and kind of look at the next 5 years and see what other savings goals we should be ramping back up to.
Isn't that so nice that you just get to have a break right now?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's glorious. And it was really, we had this discussion right after the wedding, and it was more so about how we wanted to feel about our money. And we were like, okay, it's been amazing. Don't get me wrong. We're so happy that we were able to buy the house. We were able to pay for our wedding fully in cash, no debt required. We had the wedding that we wanted, which is great. But now we just want to feel a little bit more relaxed with it, where we don't have to be super, super on it to be saving because we only have so much time to save a certain amount of money.
Yeah. It's this is kind of the light at the end of the tunnel that I like to provide to my students and my clients when it comes to especially paying off debt. It's once you free up the need to set that money aside, you'll have so much more breathing room. But there's also that weird dynamic where you get to that point of either hitting a savings goal or having paid off debt, and you're like, what now? I don't feel whole. I don't feel complete. Where's my next purpose to go? Where's the purpose my money needs to go? And so I think it's an interesting place to be in, but it's also really nice that you get to spend your money on whatever you want right now.
Exactly. And it's nice going into the holiday season with a bit of a buffer in the budget, because I know that this year will be a nice, relaxed holiday season. If we want to buy the fancy eggnog, we're going to buy the fancy eggnog.
Oh yeah, get that one. Not the generic brand.
Oh no, the good stuff.
Okay, so you had written a blog post that I loved about how you don't need to buy a home. So I would love to have this conversation, because I think, especially, I don't know, maybe we are both being hypocrites, but I preach the same of you don't need to buy a home. Even though I might be a homeowner, it might not be right for you. I'd love for you to just kind of vent, open up your mind and tell us your thoughts.
So the thing with home ownership, the thing that actually prompted me to write that article is that people think that it's the end all be all of financial security and success. And it is not. So a lot of people will get into this, oh, well, I'm not a grown up until I buy a house, or I have to buy a house, or justify buying too much house because it's an investment, it's the right financial move. And it drives me up the wall, because I love my house. I love being a homeowner, but you have to go into it thinking of it as a lifestyle purchase. And what that means to me is that you cannot justify rating your retirement or scaling way back on your other savings or putting yourself in a precarious financial position to do it. Because at the end of the day, this is something you're doing because you want to do it. And that's awesome. I wanted to do it, but it has to fit within the rest of your financial life because it realistically is something that should be considered a want. Yes, you need to live somewhere, but you can rent something more affordable and invest your money and come out, roughly in a similar financial spot if you run the numbers on owning a home for 25 years versus renting something more affordable and investing. So it just drives me up the wall when people throw everything else in their financial life to the wayside because, buying a home is the perfect investment. It is not this magical financial product that you get to live in that's also going to make you rich. That is not at all what a home is or what home ownership is. And it drives me bananas.
Yes, I so wish that my parents would have been obviously I was old enough to make my own financial decisions when I bought my home, but I was like, you guys were supposed to warn me of all these things. Like the roof leaking and noisy neighbors and just like things that you immediately lose control over when you're all of a sudden like tied into a mortgage for the next 30 years. Obviously you can sell it, but it's still a pretty permanent thing. It's not like you can just turn around your home as quickly as you could easily move if you were renting.
Exactly. And that's one of the biggest lifestyle things is people and my now husband had actually purchased his home before we even started dating. And so he had a house before we bought this one. And let me just tell you, if you can wait and just buy your house with your partner that you want, it's going to save you a lot of stress just buying instead of buying and selling at the same time. I am not going to lie to you. Buying and selling was rough. It was probably the most stressful kind of 2 months that we've been through because we're trying to get things ready. I feel like I spent more hours painting in a week than I did at my full-time job. It was a lot.
I can't imagine. I definitely anticipate selling my home because it's definitely not my forever home. I'm in Milan right now and my home is in Chicago. And I can't even imagine the work that goes into then repackaging this enormous investment that I've made to put it back onto the market. It's just I don't even want to think about it.
It was a lot. And we partially put it on ourselves with an accelerated timeline. And there are definitely ways you can do it manageably. But the thing was, it was the switching costs and the switching effort is just so high that renting can be, again, a great lifestyle move if you are not sure you're going to be somewhere for 10 years, or if you want the flexibility to move for your career, or you want the flexibility to go to Milan and not have a house that you're renting out or maintaining or anything like that. Like, renting can be such a great move from a lifestyle perspective.
So I wonder, what are your thoughts around what people truly believe, like what they hear or what, I don't know. There's so many people that just feel like they have to buy a home, especially around our age and in your kind of later 20s, early 30s. It's really this push effort that all of a sudden everyone's doing it. Do you think it's because everyone's doing it? Do you think it's because me partially is there's so many businesses out there that, it's their job to sell home ownership.
Definitely. So I think there's two things. There's feeling like you have to and wanting to. And so if you just feel like you have to, please don't buy a house. It is such an expensive thing to do because you feel like you have to. If you're not sure if you want to go to Coachella, but you feel like you have to, just go to Coachella, right? But feeling like you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, that's not a good enough reason to do it. So please do not ever feel like you have to. And one of the things that, because you get parents or realtors or the whole real estate industry being like, you should probably buy a house because that's what adults do. And my whole thing is adults make responsible financial decisions that are sustainable for them and aligned with what they want. And so if that's not buying a house for you, don't do it. Whether it's not aligned with what you can do financially or it's what you want to do with your money, just don't do it. If you do want to buy a house though, and this is something that I find, especially we have some very pricey real estate markets in Canada, which you would not think that anyone was really like clamoring to live in the snowy wasteland that is most of our country. But we do have some really pricey real estate markets. And so a lot of people want to buy a house, but can't. Or they feel like they really need to stretch to buy a house. And in that case, it's a much tougher conversation because I did buy a house and I wanted it. And it would have been very sad for me if we couldn't afford it. But at the end of the day, there's nothing better that you can do for your finances than making sure you're not buying too much house. It really, really will hamstring you financially for a very big chunk of your life. And the most responsible decision you can make is buying the right amount of house for you, which means still being able to save for retirement, still being able to pay for repairs if they come up, because trust me, they will come up if you're a homeowner. So those are kind of the two angles. But the very easy answer is if you feel like you have to buy a house, but you're not sure about it, just don't buy a house. The end.
Right. There, our jobs are done again. We can close our blogs. No, but I think another thing, and this goes along with what you were just saying, not buying a too expensive house, but I also think timing is so important. And a lot of people will use this idea of time against us because, first and foremost, it needs to be the right time for you. And that also means like you need to have enough money available to have this be a good financial decision. Not only the money saved, but the income to be able to sustain the costs that it does cost to own and operate a home, essentially. Mm-hmm. But you're going to hear, whether it's Canada, where it's like, well, we've just continued to see this like real estate bubble, if you will, who knows what to call it, but this massive ballooning in the real estate market. So people are probably feeling this pressure of, well, I better get in now because it's just going to keep ballooning. At least that's probably most people's thoughts at this moment. And then there's also the pressure of interest rates. And if you're going to get a mortgage, and, we see that the Fed has been starting to raise interest rates little by little. And so we're starting to see that go up. And that can apply pressure to people because then they'll know that financing a house will be more expensive. What are your thoughts around that? How would you talk to someone about that if they're like, well, I want to buy a house. I may not be financially ready, but I have to get it because they're scaring me.
Definitely. It can be really, really scary, especially in a lot of different financial ways. People are always trying to predict the future. And that's really what it comes down to with interest rates are going to rise. House prices are going to keep going up. None of those have actually happened yet. So my big thing with making financial decisions like buying a house or investing or selling a stock or buying a stock or anything like that, you can only go on the information that you have right now. You can think things are going to happen in the future, but unless you have a crystal ball, in which case, if it's that accurate, you should be making more than enough money to buy a house.
Right.
You really don't know for sure. And so it's easy to get caught up in the hype of this is going to happen or that's going to happen. But you still need to make your decision based on what is true right now. And if that is you can't afford the house based on your income or the market you're in, that's true right now. And you need to make the decision based on that, not what you think might happen in the future.
Yes, I love that. There's nothing worse than someone buying a house now, just because they feel like they should. And maybe they have enough saved for the down payment, but their income isn't at the level where they can sustain owning a home and saving for other goals that they want to achieve. Like that's just when you get locked into this downward spiral.
Mm-hmm. And it's not, I mean, it's easy for us to think about, you need to balance saving and owning a home because I think as financial bloggers, that's really top of mind. But a lot of people, the better context is even you don't want to just own a home. There are going to be other things you want to do. Like you might want to travel. You might want to have a dog, which from experience is not cheap. And you might want to go on dates or go out with friends for drinks sometimes. Or yes, drink a latte or eat some avocado toast. And home ownership should not mean that you can't do any of those things for 25 or 30 years, because that is unsustainable, even more so than not being able to save.
Yeah, I think it's really important to show that like even of your saved money, the money that's in your home shouldn't be like in the most largest portion of your portfolio. Like you still have to have emergency savings and you still want to be saving for retirement because your home, that you live in, if you're planning to retire and live in this home forever, then you have to have money in order to stay in this home. Otherwise, you're going to have to sell it when that was the whole goal in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Before we move on to the money round, let's just kind of have you leave some quick kind of step by step. So like if someone is like, okay, I want to buy a house, I may not be ready yet. What's the next thing? What are the next like handful of things that they can do to get themselves to the point where they can buy a house?
Definitely. There are a lot of numbers that you can run. So first and foremost, looking at your monthly income, looking at how much a mortgage would be on the type of house you want, and then estimating the other costs involved. So maybe you want to buy a condo. Are there condo fees? What are property taxes like in your area? What are you going to have to pay monthly towards those? Looking at all of those costs and really just getting a ballpark number. And in an ideal world, you want that ballpark number to be in and around 30% of your take-home income. There are a lot of online calculators that can help you with these kind of calculations specific to your area. You can creep on realtor.com or whatever house sites that you guys use in the States to look at home values in your area. That part of the process, personally, I thought was really fun, of like running these numbers and seeing what things would cost. But if you're not sure about the whole process, that is the best way I found to get more information, get a little bit more clarity on what it'll actually cost and what that really means for your monthly money situation. Because yes, we can talk about, over 30 years, but at the end of the day, most of us still think about money monthly, right? Like, how is it going to impact my life on a monthly basis or a paycheck cycle basis? And getting those numbers is one of the best ways that you can preemptively try to see how it would fit into your budget.
Yes, I think that's so much more important than just starting to look at like, okay, how much do I need to save for a down payment? Because that is the long-term impact.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, they still want to save for a down payment. So I know you went pretty aggressive. What are some of your best tips for, stashing that cash so that they can get to that point where they are comfortable, now they know this will fit monthly. Now I just want to put the money down and buy the house. What tips do you have?
The two biggest things that helped me save up my down payment and my closing costs were, number one, first and foremost, tracking my spending. So this was actually the prompt for me to start tracking my spending. Was I didn't know where my money was going and I wanted to put away more towards the house down payment. So I was like, okay, I should track where my money's going. And it was shocking. It was like genuinely a shock to write down. I actually used an Excel spreadsheet, but instead of relying on Mint or an app or anything, I was really like, okay, I'm going to commit for a couple months and put every single thing I buy into an Excel spreadsheet and see what's up. And it was really surprising. And in some ways, it actually made me feel better about things I was buying, because when I looked back on them, I was like, you know what? I am genuinely glad I spent that $50 or that $100. And at the end of the month, I was like, you know what? I would do that again. I'm happy about it. And then there were other things where I was like, maybe I don't want to be spending that money on a monthly basis. And I was able to cancel subscriptions I wasn't using or just be more conscious of where I was spending money. So that was really helpful. And the other thing that, I mean, I can't talk about saving for a house down payment without it, was side hustling. And so part of this was my blog was starting to bring in freelance work, but working on top of a full-time job was something that I hadn't really done or considered, but it was a huge boost when I started to do it because I could just put all of the money that came from freelancing. I wasn't budgeting for it. It was really extra money that all went straight into my down payment savings, and I wouldn't have been able to hit my goal on my timeline without it.
All right, let's go into the money round now. Some really great tips. And I think a lot of the things that, even just like questions you said to ask yourself when you're considering whether this is really right for you or not, I think those are all super tangible. So we're going to talk about you again, personally, although I think we've been doing that a lot. You recently said you got married, so congrats.
Thank you.
And I love that you said, like, right after you were married, you sat down with your partner and you were like, okay, what's our new goal? What's next? But how are you in the day-to-day or week-to-week, month-to-month managing your finances? What have you decided is like the best plan and strategy for the both of you? And were you managing them together before you actually tied the knot?
We were doing pretty much what we are doing now together as soon as we bought our house. And the house was really funny because in a lot of ways, it's almost a bigger commitment, or it felt like a bigger commitment than an early marriage, because if the worst case scenario happened tomorrow and we were to separate, the house would be the biggest thing that we'd have to untangle. So it was really when we got the house that we were like, okay, we're ready for a joint account. We want to have a joint account. So we get paid into separate checkings accounts. And then every paycheck, we have a set budget that we built together. And we've calculated how much we each need to put into the joint account to cover everything that we have joint budgeted for. So our joint budget includes all of the house expenses, restaurants, entertainment, essentials like toothpaste. Like we've really budgeted a lot in there. So the dog, all of that good stuff is out of our joint account. So we each contribute into it every paycheck. And then what we do is we have a joint spreadsheet. And so whenever one of us spends money for something that would be considered a household expense or coming out of the joint budget, we record it in this spreadsheet, and it keeps track of kind of who's paid for what from where. And this sounds really high effort, but it's really great because that way we can spend on the credit cards that we're already using. Like if I go to buy groceries, I just record it in the spreadsheet, groceries, this amount of money. And the spreadsheet will actually tell me at the end of the month how much I need to reimburse myself from the joint account. Usually it goes straight to my credit card to pay off the groceries and just like the random things that I put on it for our joint spending. And so that is the system we came up with when we bought the house. And other than a few tweaks to budget categories, it's actually working really well for us. So we didn't really change anything when we got married.
That's so helpful. Thank you for stepping us through that. And nothing says love like a joint spreadsheet.
That's exactly what I tell him every time we update it.
You're like, this is why I married you.
Yeah. Well, oh my gosh. And he built the spreadsheet for us. So my husband's a developer. And so he did all these like advanced formulas. And I was like, you love me.
Oh, that's amazing. What motivates you now? And I know that you said, as far as like what you're saving for next or what your next step is financially, you haven't really decided yet because you have that 6-month wiggle room before you meet again. But what are some things that you've been considering for that next financial goal?
I really think, and I feel like it makes me sound very old, but I think my next big focus is going to be retirement and really kind of just throwing a lot of money as much as I can towards retirement. And that makes me also sound like a financial independence retire early blogger, which I am not. Let me just be very clear. I have no intention to retire in 10 years. But I am also at the point where I'm turning 30 in January and I'm like, okay, I've been pretty good. I've been consistently saving little by little towards my retirement ever since I started working. And then about 3 years ago, I actually got my act together and invested those savings. But it really is something that with the house and the wedding taking priority, I think it might be time for retirement to take a little bit of priority in terms of my savings goals and really just stashing money away for that.
Yeah, especially if right now you're going, well, I have some time before maybe I take a different life step. You can at least set aside the money now into retirement so that it can capitalize on that time that you're going to give it.
And the other thing too is that if I put money away right now for retirement, it's going to have, hopefully 30 years to compound and earn money in my retirement account. So I think it's a good time to focus on it. And there may be periods of time in the next few years where I'm saving less for retirement. So I think it'll be a good kind of year to focus on that.
Yeah. And you mentioned the financial independence, retire early, or the FIRE movement, which, to each their own. If you want to do that, go for it. I think there's been some people go, well, I'm not that because I want to work. I'm just going to work for the rest of my life. And I love that you're like, well, I'm going to save for retirement, because I think people forget that this is another thing you can't predict. You can't predict if your skills are going to be obsolete, which I would hope they wouldn't be, but that could happen, or that you get disabled or something else happens where you can no longer work and make an income. And a lot of people just think like, oh, I'm not going to worry about retirement, especially not retiring early, because I want to work for the rest of my life.
It's true. And a lot of what we see, in terms of reporting around retirement, a bunch of people retire when they have to, not when they want to. And for sure, but it is something important to remember is like health is not guaranteed, and saving for future you is a non-negotiable even if you don't think you're going to retire by 35.
Right. Let's talk about some unconventional money moves or money wisdoms that you believe in and implement into your daily life.
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Unconventional. I think I might be pretty conventional with my money. Honestly, I think the biggest thing that I think would be at least not really evident that I do with my money is how I manage my freelance income. And so that might be a totally separate conversation, but I have a system that I've implemented for managing how money kind of comes in through my freelance efforts and how I pay myself. And I've actually got it set up so that no matter what is happening, whether it's a big month or a slow month, I pay myself a regular kind of paycheck, a fake paycheck, to myself from my business. And that has been something that's really, really been very helpful for me in terms of understanding my business and understanding how it makes money and how cash flows through it, and has really kept me on track. I think it's less unconventional as it is the thing that people are surprised when I tell them that I do with my business.
Do you would you want to take your business full time, or do you love your current job and you just love having a side hustle?
I love my current job. I actually got my job really through my blog because it's essentially, I'm in content marketing, right? So it's essentially running a blog, which I do on the side, and doing it for a business. And my interview was maybe 3 minutes talking about what I was doing before, which was enterprise marketing. And then the rest of the interview was just talking about my blog and what I was doing there and strategies I was implementing. And I guarantee you it's why I got the job. And I love it. I think my current job is phenomenal. I have had times in previous jobs where I've definitely thought I should really quit and do my blog full time. But for now, I absolutely adore my current job.
I'd love to hear that. We are going to go into the quick and dirty Q&A to wrap up the show. So we will start with a little confession. This is something I like to ask every once in a while, just especially the money bloggers and the financial experts, to share something embarrassing or, I don't know, not something they would love to tout around about, a money move that you've made that may not be something you're the most proud of, or like something you don't spend money on because you're being too frugal, which could also be embarrassing. And how do you rationalize that?
Oh, wow. So one story really comes to mind because I think one of the money moves that we always tell people, just like, don't do this, is spending money to feel a certain way. So like buying a new top to wear to a job interview because you think the new top is going to make you feel confident. And those kind of things can be really emotional, or like buying a leather jacket because then you'll be like a cool girl with a leather jacket. And so that's like something we say, try to do less of or be really cognizant of. And I have probably the worst story of all time for buying something for that reason. So I went to Australia for a semester in university to study abroad. And within about a week and a half of getting there, I was really, really homesick. And so I decided that the best thing to do in January in Sydney, where it is maybe like 45 degrees Celsius every single day, and I thought I was probably going to die from heat, I decided that the one thing that would make me feel less homesick was a Lululemon hoodie. So I went to Lululemon in Australia and I bought one of those like super, super warm Lululemon hoodies, spent like, I think 150 Australian dollars on this hoodie that I could have gotten at home, and put it on in the 45 degrees Celsius weather and literally had to like sit in front of the air conditioner to be able to sit with it on. And to this day, it's probably like the most ridiculous purchase I've ever made, because I mean, it really didn't make me feel measurably more like I was at home. And it was the worst coping mechanism. And I think I got rid of it a couple years ago. Anyways, it was just this like, yeah, I really probably did not need to spend that 150 Australian dollars on a hoodie in the middle of Australian summer.
I was going to say, but do you still have the hoodie? But if you got rid of it, shucks. Okay. So I always share a confession as an exchange, so I don't just have to put you on blast. And mine is something that I currently do. It's more of like a frugal thing. Or it could just be because I'm lazy. But I don't know if you're familiar with dry shampoo.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And when you buy it at the store, it's first of all, like most of the time, more than $5. It's not like a cheap thing, but dry shampoo, when you buy it, it's gone in like 3 uses. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe you have a better dry shampoo, but all the dry shampoos I buy, I like spray it on my head, or I just have really oily scalp, but it's always gone so fast. So I had just decided many years ago, and every once in a while I'll indulge in a can, but many years ago I was like, I'm not buying this shit. It doesn't last and it's expensive. So I use cornstarch. And like, I think people use baby powder, but I use cornstarch because do not have time to go to the store and buy baby powder.
Totally. Well, I've heard it's actually really effective, and you have blonde hair, right? So that it like blends in well.
Yes, but it cakes, and then it makes your head smell. But anything to save couple bucks. So yeah, everyone probably thinks I'm really gross because I think a couple podcasts ago I said I didn't buy shampoo. So there you go. I have bad hygiene. What is one non-negotiable money indulgence that you refuse to cut from your budget?
This is actually probably more of a money confession than the last one, to be quite frank, because I feel like people have a lot of, maybe just my family has a lot of hang-ups about this, but the one thing that I would cut it if I absolutely had to, but I really don't want to, is we pay for a cleaning service every 2 weeks, and it is the best ever. And I just absolutely love not having to keep like this running list of chores in my head of like what has to get done this week or like what I'm going to have to do on the weekend. Buying that indulgence for myself is like my absolute number one. I would cut so much out of my budget before I cut that.
That's awesome. What is one small $100 or less investment that has helped you get ahead?
I feel like such a plagiarizer stealing this, because I saw Chelsea at the Financial Diet said this about a similar question, but my domain name for my blog. But also the other one that I would put in there that even as a total package cost under $100 is the book called Profit First. It is absolutely the best money that I've ever spent in terms of learning how to manage my freelance income. It is phenomenal.
Okay, other than Profit First, what is your favorite money book?
Ooh, personal finance wise, Worry Free Money by Shannon Lee Simmons. It is, I mean, I could go on for 5 whole minutes about how amazing this book is for helping you figure out how to manage your money monthly, how to get around and figure out your feelings about money, how to prioritize what you want to spend your money on, how to make decisions about it. Is just like absolutely phenomenal. And she's so approachable. I mean, her intro story in the book is about IKEA shopping and how she had a bit of a meltdown over a couch, and what she ended up realizing buying the couch at IKEA was meaning to her in the context of her life, and how she sorted out the money and the feelings. And it was just, it's phenomenal. She is a financial planner here in Canada. She works with clients one-on-one through her company. And so she brings all of that experience and just her phenomenal personality to this book. And I really cannot say enough good things about it. It's Worry Free Money by Shannon Lee Simmons.
Awesome. What is your best tip for focus or self-discipline when working, I was going to say for yourself, but also working from home?
I think routine really cannot be overstated. For me, especially imposing really a morning routine has been so key to keeping me productive, keeping me on schedule, and just like getting my tasks done. Because when you don't have anywhere to go in the mornings, it's very easy, I find, to slip into, well, I'll just watch some TV until I have to get to work. And then you're just not in the right headspace to sit down and be like, okay, it's time to work now.
Right. Okay. Desirae, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing so many great tips, having a fun conversation about homeownership. I'd love for you to tell us where we can find you so we can follow along and stay in touch.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. If anybody wants to hang out with me on the internet, I'm on Twitter at half_banked, and my website is halfbanked.com. And those are kind of the two big things. Oh, and on Instagram, I'm Desirae O, DESIRAEO. That one is just one that I have not actually fully branded, but it is my Instagram hideout.
It's still beautifully branded in the pictures, so
thank you.
You got that. Thank you so much. And that is a wrap on episode number 85 with Desirae Odjick. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did and found Desirae as delightful and wonderful and so easy to learn from. You should definitely check out her website at halfbanked.com, or you can head to the show notes of this episode to get all of the resources mentioned throughout by going to wanderwealthypodcast.com/podcast/episode 85. And hey, by the way, if you're looking for a girl gang to join to talk money, then you should definitely come over to the Wealthy Wanderers Facebook community. You can go to wanderwealthy.com/FB or check the show description in your podcast app or check it out on the show notes. Wherever you want to go, it should be linked up, where you can get access to our special private Facebook community where it is a safe space to talk openly about money, ask your questions, get answers, talk about the show, whatever you want to do. It's a fun place to hang out, and there's lots of supportive women and men in that. So head to wanderwealthy.com/FB to get in our community, and we will see you there. All right, until next time, I hope you wander wealthy.